this bill.
I call Mahesh Prindra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to speak to the second reading of the Policing Cost Recovery Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, the three pillars of our democracy are the Parliament, the judiciary, and the police. These three pillars are independent of each other with specific responsibilities, and they are all fundamental to providing a safe, free, democratic society where people are free to raise their families, they are free to go about doing their lawful business, running their lives and raising their children with the safety that if their right to exist safely in a society is impeded by anybody, then the state, through the police, will protect them. Now, policing is a service, it is a duty and it is a responsibility of the state, Mr. Speaker. It is not a tradable commodity from which the state should derive a revenue stream. It is not a service that can in any way be equated to the services provided by the DIA or the customs to provide such things as passports and charge them for it. The police force is a police force, Mr. Speaker. It is there to protect and serve. It is there to provide protection to all New Zealanders, regardless of one's race, ethnicity, religion, socio-economic status, or indeed the size of their wallet. New Zealand First believes that keeping our communities safe through policing is the core responsibility of the state, and police vetting is inseparable from these basic policing functions. The police force and the services it provides are funded from main tax revenue, and we believe that it should stay that way. We believe that police should carry out vetting as part of their core police work, Mr. Speaker. We see this amendment, which asks New Zealanders to pay for a vetting service with a separate fee, as the thin edge of the very, very fat National Party wage, which will be steadily and quietly tapped into, extracting at every tap of the hammer money from New Zealanders who are seeking help from the police force. We believe that this bill will provide the impetus for the police to start charging for other services they currently provide as core business, such as attending to emergencies, family violence incidents, property crime, or child abuse. So where does this stop, Mr. Speaker? Will we be charging for the emergency services such as attending to burglaries or thefts or violence? Mr. Speaker, that cannot happen. We can't support any kickstart to our police being a pay-as-you-go or a user-pay system.
That's right.
That is not the key thing to do. The Vulnerable Children Act 2014 requires standard screening and vetting of all central government staff and government-funded contractors working with children. This is a voluntary regime for business, Mr. Speaker. NGOs and voluntary organizations are covered under these amendments, and it will be reviewed in 2 years. Now, community groups, non-government organizations, and other community organizations who rely on volunteers and are not resourced financially may well be prevented from going through the vetting process because of this amendment. Because the cost will not be bearable for them because they do not have the resources to fund for these activities, which are currently being provided for by the police. When that happens, Mr. Speaker, children, women, and elderly and other vulnerable members of our society may well be put at risk due to caregivers and others working with these vulnerable citizens not being vetted. I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, this government weren't intending to put our vulnerable members of society at such a risk. Finally, it is the state that requires that all paid and unpaid staff in schools to undergo a police check. Paying for the service will increase compliance costs for those schools, which will have a negative impact on the operational budget of the schools, particularly small schools. This government is wanting to tighten the funding bills of its public schools and now adding more financial constraints with this bill. That is criminal, Mr. Speaker. New Zealand First does not support this bill because it does not support the police charging for any of its core services. Your Honor.